Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Nilo Casimiron Ericsson joins us from Uppsala, Sweden, where he is co-founder and product manager for Dirac Research. Dirac is the developer of the Dirac Live room correction system that is used by the world's leading AV receiver and sound processor brands to correct frequency and phase distortion caused by loudspeakers and room acoustics. Around the time that this podcast is dropping, Dirac will be at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, officially unveiling Dirac Live Active Room Treatment, which is designed to address bass resonance and room decay time in home theaters and home entertainment rooms. We've never really explored Dirac's technology or digital signal processing in depth on the podcast, so I felt like this announcement was the perfect entree into that discussion. Nilo Casimiron Ericsson, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. It's my pleasure.
Now, full disclosure, you and I spoke about a week before this recording, specifically about the announcement about Dirac Live Active Room Treatment. And that's when I realized that there was a lot more to talk about, and I kind of wanted to share it with our podcast audience. We're definitely going to cover how Dirac Research was formed out of your PhD work. But before we get there, I wanted to go back a little bit further. Prior to your time at Uppsala University in Sweden, what were the earliest indications that you would one day go into audio, acoustics, or digital signal processing as a career?
Wow. Yeah, great question. I haven't really thought about that going that far back. I mean, when I usually get this question, it all starts like 20 years ago when we founded the company. But now you to say it, and I think a bit more. I maybe with many others, I used to have a Walkman. I also remember at my flat where I lived when I was little. We had a stereo stack with what you had in the 80s, including an equalizer. So it's a stereo 10 or 11 band equalizer. And I remember I was fiddling around with that, trying to figure out like the best sound, but I didn't have a clue of what you were supposed to do that. So I always ended up with the smiling curve on that. So I'm guilty of that as well.
Well, you're fancy. You had 10. I had 5. So that's a lot more to mess up, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember the brand. I think it was a Yamaha or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a early little teaser about maybe something you'd get into and learn a lot more. But then you go into I guess at the university level, do you start getting into physics, or what is your initial study before you go into the PhD program later?
Yeah. So there's an education or at the university called engineering physics. So it's like applied physics on engineering problems. So you read about quantum mechanics, differential equations, all that kind of good stuff. And there are also some more applied courses, including image compression, neural networks, very interesting stuff, and control theory and signal processing. And that's where I really, understood and realized what you can do with mathematics, basically. So you do measurements, you make captures of the real world and digitize them, and then you could do stuff there and improve the real world, so to say, with those results. That definitely led me in the right direction. But to actually start the company that we have now was more of a team thing.
Right.
We were not doing acoustics at the time. We were doing digital radio communications. So basically working on like 4G mobile networks at that time, and the wireless part, like a base station talking to a mobile. And the thing was that in that area, we applied technologies, filtering technologies to make sure that the signal that arrives at the mobile can be restored to what it was intended, and you can decode the message. That it could be like a speech, or it could be a text message, or data transfer in some way. I mean, back in those days, you were not talking about mobile internet or these kind of things that we're doing now with like Teams meetings. So what we thought, what was going on then was that the base station, which is like the big antenna that's standing somewhere, is transmitting stuff to the mobile, and the mobile is moving around. There is a way to sort of pre-distort the message that's going from the base station, so that when it arrives in the mobile, it's sort of right. It's taking into account whatever distortion happens on the way, and that takes away the effort from the mobile to do that kind of processing, because you have all the power in the base station. So we thought that could be maybe applied to speakers. So the loudspeaker and the amplifier and a DSP somewhere in the chain could be the base station, and your ears are the mobile. So can we somehow pre-distort the sound, so when you hear it, it's correct? And what we then started to work on was like a proof of concept, and it worked. Maybe not always. It wasn't very robust, but enough to make like demos. And we made demos to investors that were interested. They told us, "Hey, you need to participate in this. You need to build. You need to make a business plan around that." And we did. And when I say we were a team from the university. So we were 6 people, 4 students and 2 professors. And so there was a business plan contest that we participated in, and we eventually won that in Sweden. And that's when we decided to, let's make a company around that. But we still had like, I had like 4 years still on my PhD. So it was a slow start.
Okay. And we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, around that time. Okay.
Exactly.
And when I was looking into the company a little bit further to come up with questions, so I don't sound completely out of my realm here, I learned a good story behind the company name, which I didn't know. Not being well versed in theoretical physics, I wasn't familiar with the Nobel laureate Paul Dirac.
Right.
What was it that what was his achievement that inspired the company name?
Yeah, so when you're studying quantum mechanics and all that, you talk about not being exactly sure about. You have this what do you call it? Uncertainty theory. Like a particle is not always where you think it is, and it's distributed. So that kind of distribution of energy, you could approximate with, or it was described by this Dirac delta pulse, the Dirac delta pulse, and that can be infinitely. When you're certain about the location, then it's infinitely thin and with unit energy. So that, in a way, describes a transparent system. It means that if the system distorts a signal in the way as a delta, the Dirac delta function, then it doesn't distort it. It just passes it through. And that's what we then realized, that that's maybe the target you should have for a speaker system. So if you measure them in the way that you get an impulse response out of the speaker in the room, you will see that it's far from that ideal spike that you inject in the at the input. And that spike is what you actually want to hear, because that's how natural sound is heard, like a natural instrument or a voice or a bird or something, or an explosion. So that became like the inspiration to correct for the speakers and the room acoustics. We want to restore that Dirac delta function to the system, so that it doesn't distort the sound.
Okay. So I know that your focus is quite diverse after that, because you now have your patented sound solution technology spans across mobile, gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality, headphones, streaming, automotive and commercial AV, as well as the residential channel. So where were your first successes? Was it in the residential market, or did you find success elsewhere first in a different area?
Yeah, great question. We started off with the residential thing, and that's where we did the demos, and that's where we got traction. But where it took off like commercially to begin with, and that's actually still our number one basis that we earn on, it's automotive. So we took that speaker demo and we went to Germany, to Munich, and met with the BMW folks, the people responsible for the audio systems at BMW. And they liked the demo and they gave us a chance. So they lent us a car and said, "Hey, can you do that inside the car for all these speakers?" So we took that car back to our lab. We had to rent a place to put the car in, and we did all kinds of measurements to sort of figure out how to do this in the car. And yeah, so that was like the embryo of what we're doing today in automotive. And actually the technology that we used then is what we still use today, and we call it direct live room correction. That's that impulse response correction. Of course, we're improved and so on, and refined it, but the baseline of that is the same thing. It's the same basics. Impulse response correction.
I want to kind of get into the Dirac Live a little more in depth, but I find it interesting that your focus as product manager is on the headphone category. So I think it's easier to kind of understand room correction as a thing, because you're dealing with signals going through the air and reaching a speaker and time delays and things like that, and other issues that cause sound to not really be as clear as it could be or should be. When you're dealing with a headphone, how does the technology change? Like, what are you doing to optimize the performance of a headphone?
Right. So again, it's about doing measurements to sort of get a diagnostic of what the situation is. But then it has quite much in common with what we do in room correction. We have through the years learned what people like in terms of what we like when we listen to headphones. The ones that I'm using now, Sony, I think they're quite nice and good in the way they sound. And what we have realized is that when you listen to headphones, a couple of things go missing. One thing is the distance to speakers, and usually when listening to music has been produced with speakers in a studio, for example, right. Studio monitors, and that's how the producer, the creator, the artist has intended it to be heard. And that goes missing in the headphones because you have the soundstage is like between your left and right ear and goes right through your head. Not at all what you have, the nice stage you have when listening to speakers. The other thing that goes missing is the room effect, the room gain, the bass, the house curve, all that. That's also, I mean, if you don't intentionally put it there, it's not going to be there in the headphones. So those are the things that we realized, and we just had to figure out, like, how do we put that back in there? So one thing is we have an EQ curve, so that we make the headphones sound nice and comfortable and enjoyable. But then to get this soundstage back, we had to go, to psychoacoustics. And we did experiments on that early on, like more than 10 years ago, where we did, again, measurements, putting microphones in our ears, playing test sounds at different places and analyzing the measurements and, hey, what's going on? Yeah, and then that led to what is called head-related transfer functions. So it means that the sound that reaches your ears becomes colored and delayed. You get a gain and delay thing plus a coloration of the sound that tells your brain where the sound is coming from. I suppose you know about that. That is used in virtual reality, for example, or augmented reality. So making your brain believe that there's a bird flying over there when you're using headphones. It's available in games, or if you have a VR headset with headphones. So that we also put in our headphone tunings, but only very subtle, and we call it spatialization. So stereo spatialization is what we apply besides that house curve thing, and that gives you definitely a more comfortable listening experience than just listening to plain stereo in your headphones. I use also to think about, so if you listen to Beatles, for example, all recordings, you have, it's hard pan music. You have the drums in the left and you have the guitar on the right, and Paul McCartney, I think, usually singing in the middle. In headphones, that's awful, especially now with the digital formats that you have such great channel separation between left and right. But if you think about it, back in those days, you had the vinyl disc. Of people still use them, but there you have a channel separation of 10, 15 dB maybe only. So listening to headphones on a vinyl player is not as bad as listening to it in a digital or CD setting. So I mean, it goes back to when vinyl, the vinyl days as well. I mean, you can build a story on that as well. Digital maybe ruined a bit of the stereo and the headphone experience.
So the goal is to make it sound as natural as much as a room experience with sound inside a headphone as you can, closer to the original recording experience.
Right.
So do you, when you're working with a manufacturer of headphones, they obviously have their own design, which are physical attributes to the headphones, but then they've got sound signatures as well, right? So is there a way that you help to improve their experience without making it just kind of a vanilla sort of sounding technology, not to make it sound negative, but to make, you don't want it to be the same for every manufacturer because they want to have their own sound, right?
Right. You're totally right.
So how do you do that?
You could say the vanilla thing was a good analogy, because there are always acoustical issues, and with the technology that we provide, you just take them away. We take care of them digitally, and then you have this vanilla ice cream that you can put your topping on.
Okay.
So that's a really good analogy.
So you're giving them sort of the baseline kind of improvements, and then they can enhance beyond that. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, or we do that in a collaborative fashion.
Yeah. So you're not just handing them a software to implement. You're actually collaborating back and forth with their design team. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, so I want to continue our conversation more about the residential space and Dirac Live. But first, let's just take a short break.
Do you want superior smart home automation at a great value? Shelly Wi-Fi relays by Alterco Robotics cover DC to line voltage, allowing you to control lights, outlets, appliances, garage doors, pumps, and much more. There are Shelly sensors and power measurement devices to help you measure temperature, humidity, lux, or motion, and electrical consumption from single wire to 3-phase with neutral. You can use Shelly with a licensed driver for Control 4, Elon, or other premium systems, as well as your customer's existing hub, voice assistant, or any platform that accepts REST, MQTT, or CoAP. Shelly can make IoT very easy. Available now at Blackwire, City Electric Supply, and Worthington, or at shellyusa.com.
Welcome back. We were talking with Nilo Casimiron Ericsson, co-founder and product manager for Dirac Research. Switching back into the residential space, which is really our focus. You started to explain Dirac Live a bit. Can you explain sort of how physical acoustics, the treatment in a room, may not be enough for proper acoustics in a room, why you need room correction in the first place?
Yeah, I think I can explain that. And thing is that you can, of course, build a very nice room and have nice speakers and place them optimally for an enjoyable experience. But it's not everybody's luxury to be able to do that. And
Sure.
Maybe the speakers have to stand where they are, or maybe you cannot put up bass traps and diffusers and all that stuff. So in those cases, and I think also in some of the more luxury cases as well, digital room correction really helps in getting you there to the right and nice experience. Then without having to rearrange everything to your favorite or to the way that benefits the sound. So you do that in a signal processing way instead.
And how does Dirac Live actually work? It's implemented into sound processors and AV receivers, and it's initially done as a process when you set up the room. It involves a microphone, correct? Do you move the microphone throughout the room? Does it stay in one central spot? Explain the procedure for those who've never worked with a receiver with Dirac Live in it.
Yeah, sure. So when you want to set up a speaker system in your room, you usually have one place where you're going to sit. Like this is the center, the sweet spot we call it, and this is where everything is going to be optimal. And that's also the place where you have to do the first measurement when you're using Dirac Live. you use this microphone, a measurement microphone, that you place a different position, but you begin with the spot where you're going to be sitting, and you want to take a measurement like where your head would be. What happens then with our software is that a test signal is played through all the speakers, and it's picked up by this microphone, obviously. So the software then has like an acoustic image of the speakers in that room, in that position, in that microphone position. So what you could easily do with that single measurement is to align all the speakers so that they sound equally loud and with equal, as equally distant, like in terms of how long it takes for the signal to reach the microphone. And when you do that, you will have a sense of all the speakers being at an equal distance and being equally powerful, so to say.
Okay.
So that's like the first measurement and what that does to you. But there's more to that. It's more to it to get a good room response. So we urge people, I mean, one microphone position is not enough, because then you will have you can make a correction with one microphone position, but you will have a very, very good sound right there, but you're not sitting like in a vice with your head. I heard that expression recently.
Okay.
You're usually moving around. So you want to take a few more measurements. Also, maybe you have people sitting next to you that also want to have a nice experience. So you would be taking similar measurements in a like 40, 50 centimeter grid around you where you want the sound to be good. And focus on the area where you want it to be good. If you don't care, like over by the door over there, then don't measure over there. Just measure in this area, in the sofa, for example, or if you have an armchair. And what you want to do with that is to get a good spatial average of all the speakers, so that you have a good fingerprint of how the room is handling your sound, and how the speakers are also radiating and reflecting off different walls and ceiling and floor. So you get some kind of diversity. You get a better picture of the room. So with that, you can also start doing what the magnitude, like the frequency response correction, and most importantly, the impulse response correction. And that's a thing I think I need to explain.
Yeah.
So imagine you have a speaker with three drivers. You have a tweeter, you have a mid-range, and a woofer. When you take a measurement of that, you may see that this impulse response I was talking about, the Paul Dirac thing, it doesn't look like an impulse. It looks like a heartbeat or something. And that doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound natural. It maybe sound characteristic for a speaker, but it doesn't sound right. So you can imagine, just as an example, to think what this does is that the sound. Imagine that the tweeter is a bit closer to you, and the mid-range is a bit further away, and the woofer is even further away. Then you will get like a high frequency part, and then you will get a mid frequency part, and then you get like the bass part of that impulse. And with Dirac Live and picking up these measurements, that is found, and with the filter design that is like behind the scenes in Dirac Live, we can realign those tweeter, mid-range, and woofer speakers with in the digital domain, so that the tweeter, mid-range, and woofer arrive at the same time at the listening position. So you get that impulse as it was intended by the artist, maybe not by the speaker manufacturer, but by the artist.
And that's what you're referring to, are those decay times?
So it's related to the decay times,
Okay.
but it's also about like the rise time of the signal, like
Okay.
how quickly it responds to the energy that you inject. Like if it's slow to respond in the low frequencies or things like that.
Okay.
It can realign that and give that extra kick to the bass to stay in line, so to say.
Now, how much training? I was just going to ask, how much training does it require for your professional installers to use your system? Is it a fairly straightforward sort of tutorial process when they get started with a product with Dirac Live in it, and they have the right equipment with the microphone?
Yeah. So in order to be 100% successful, you may need some experience, like doing it a couple of times. But we regard it as a consumer product.
Okay.
So it should be possible for at least audiophiles, audio hobbyists, people that care and are willing to spend some time learning. They can really dig into it.
Okay.
But we made it so that you can get like to 90% of the performance within your first attempt.
Okay.
So we really tried to make it easy to do the measurements with prop guides on and like a wizard, step by step. This is what you need to do in order to collect those measurements. It's not like just waving with a mobile, using the microphone in the mobile, because we're doing things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were just waving a mobile phone around. So it requires that you can position the microphone at a certain place with a stand, for example.
Right.
At home, I don't have a proper microphone stand, so I usually have a small miniature tripod, and I stack it up with pillows to sort of get the right height. That's one way to do it.
I have one of those. Yeah. Well, so you have, I counted them up. You have almost 25 audio companies that use Dirac Live compatible products at this point. So I was impressed with how far-reaching your technology has gotten into the industry. But now with this new announcement that you're making at CES, which is you told me when we spoke before, it's not a brand new announcement. You've been kind of developing this for a little while, but it's official now, and you've got a partner that's going to implement the Dirac Live active room treatment. You had already been doing Dirac Live bass control with Dirac Live before. So what was it that was missing that this new solution corrects for with the bass response on speakers?
Right. So we knew, as you said, it's not the first time, this has been lingering around for a while, and it goes back again to automotive, where we developed what we called. Now we can take the term for it. It's called Mimo. Mimo is an abbreviation for multiple input, multiple output. So Mimo Control means that you can use multiple speakers together to optimize the sound at multiple positions in a car or in a living room. So we know that if you let speakers cooperate with each other, like help support in certain frequencies, for example, support each other in certain frequencies, then this impulse response correction that I'm talking about, you can make that even tighter than you can do with a single speaker working alone, so to say. So what we did like 15 years ago in automotive, in cars, was together with BMW and actually with Rolls-Royce, we developed something we call Dirac dimensions that could utilize all the speakers in a car together to generate a wave front that resembles the wavefront of a speaker which is further away than the actual car compartment. So with that technology, we could create virtual speakers in a virtual room. So you could say it's a way of doing virtual acoustics in car. So we knew that letting multiple speakers work together is a very powerful tool. That has gone through a couple of iterations in what it can do. And what is different between a car and a home environment is in a car, you know exactly where you're sitting, you know exactly where the speakers are. And that means that it's a very robust environment. But in a house, you have we have to make this. People have to be able to do measurements. They don't have microphone arrays with 16 microphones that we use in a car, for example. You have one single microphone that you move around, and the speakers move around. People move, and the furniture moves. So everything is different in a home in that sense, more dynamic in a way. So we basically took what we did in the car and tried to apply it in a home environment. And what we realized is that, yes, there is this reverb problem, the standing waves, the lingering bass that distorts the bass in a way. Because it's resonating in your room for longer than it should. And besides that, you have the problem that we solve with the bass control, that you have hot spots and cold spots for the bass. So at some points, some frequencies you don't even hear them. Whereas if you move the head just like this, you have much more energy in that bass frequency. So that's something we solve already with bass control. So with active room treatment, that we call this new thing, we can go even higher than in frequency to get this evenness and to also get this like cancellation of the reverb in the room. So it works up to a couple of hundred, like 300 hertz, robustly, meaning that you can skip using big bass traps in your room. So the speakers now, if you have a surround sound system, for example, the speakers will work as reverb cancelers, you could say. You can make an analogy with active noise cancellation in headphones. Active noise cancellation works by microphones picking up the noises that are surrounding you and playing anti-sound into your ear, so it cancels out whatever noise it picks up. And active room treatment works in a similar way, but we don't have microphones listening all the time because we know because the signal that we want to hear is what is playing on the track we're listening to, right? So we're not trying to cancel out like environment noise. We're just trying to make the music you're playing or the movie you're watching sound as clean as possible.
Very interesting. That's a good analogy and a good contrast as well with the noise cancellation. That helps me understand it a lot better. So your this is not just a concept. This is actually something getting implemented. So Storm Audio, a partner already with Dirac Live, is your first product that's going to be able to implement it in the new year. So that looks like that's going to just be a firmware update for them in the spring. And is that something that the technology can be applied as a firmware update for a lot of your Dirac Live partners already, or is it more complicated in certain situations?
No, it's basically that. And as far as I know, none of our partners would not be able to do that. I haven't, checked into each one of the DSPs and so on, but I don't see that being a showstopper. We don't add that much complexity to the solution.
Very good. Okay, so what they say is that Dirac Live active room treatment will be included at no additional fee on all Storm audio processors and AVRs ordered from January 1st, 2023 onward, and will be made available through a firmware update in spring 2023, I guess, on existing products. So that's just going to be part of their solution there going forward. But purchasing a license from Dirac's online store is $299. So I look forward to hearing this unfortunately, I won't be at CES, but I look forward to hearing this actually demonstrated at some point, because I think that's probably the most effective way to understand how it all works. But I do appreciate the explanation, and it's been really great talking to you, Nilo. Thanks for taking another time out to talk to me and share this really interesting update to our audience.
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk again and show it to you, if not at CES, then some other point. I'm sure that will happen.
Yes, I'm sure it will. We'll find a time. We'll connect at some point, or someone from your team. So thanks again. Have a great holiday season, and good luck at CES.
Thank you. You too.
Nilo Casimiron Ericsson is co-founder and product manager for Dirac Research in Uppsala, Sweden. You can learn more about his company at dirac.com. That wraps up today's show. Special thanks to Pretty Easy Podcast for producing and editing this episode. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast on your preferred platform and consider rating or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech. Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.